All right, what's up, you guys? My name is Rodolfo. Some people call me Aaron, and I am a Cal State San Bernardino graduate, and I work at a youth shelter here in Mentone. And I'm so happy to have you guys on this podcast for episode number 1.
Hi guys, my name is Eric Ogaz. I'm a graduate at Grand Canyon University, and I'm currently working at an internship at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Glad to be here. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, guys. So did you want to just give me some feedback on what you got from the TED Talk video?
Yeah, so what I thought was really interesting about the video was that to level, success, even within either education, military, sports, whatever field of work that you're in, it's not based off of intelligence or strength or even just wittiness. It's based on grit. And I thought that was an interesting concept of somebody's grit actually determines somebody's success. We did it in baseball at the time, right? When we looked at the other team and we're like, okay, he could probably play, he probably can't, just based off of their swagger, right? Based off of how you can tell they have some fight in them. So I think that was very interesting concept from the original traditional thought, right? You have to have a high IQ, intelligence, strength to succeed in life, when it's just not true. You just need some grit, really.
Yeah, and I grew up early in high school believing that your parents had to be smart for you to be smart, or if I seen a smart kid, well, their parents are probably smart, and like you mentioned about us being on a baseball team and kind of evaluating or trying to observe okay, can this kid play? That kid doesn't look any good. I would go even further, Eric, to even say you and myself, us being the smaller guys on the baseball team and still being able to keep up with the people who were genetically blessed, whether they're 6'2", Tristan Workman, or Derek Negretti, who could throw 87 in sophomore year. We were still able to compete with them. We were still able to get in the batter's box with them. We were still able to play up the middle, as infielders. We were able to hold our ground. And that, just like she mentioned, and she also, I think she did a great job encompassing everything. She brought in social, class. She brought in ethnicity. She brought in whether background. She included background. She included all these things and said that there's no correlation, that the only correlation is that you could be rich, you can be poor, and you can still have that one thing like you mentioned, and it's grit. Yeah, I think she did a terrific job. Was there any key points or anything that she said that stuck out to you that you were kind of meditating on, or you just kind of sat back and just kind of reflected on?
Yeah, I think it was just generally the traditional concept or thought pattern of you have to be smart to succeed in life, and that's not the case.
Exactly.
You just have to have the willpower, the strength, the motivation to, get a goal in your head and put the work towards that goal. It's not going to happen. It's not going to just come to you. It needs to be put work in, every day, every morning. You got to put in the necessary work just to succeed. You can't just expect it or rely on talent, which is what most people do. And if they don't have that talent, they kind of automatically assume that they're not ready or that's just not their spot. And that's not necessarily the case. If you want something and if you want to achieve it, you just got to put the work for it, and you just got to be gritty. And so I think that was just a good takeaway that I had.
Yeah, on that note too, I would like to mention, let me see if I can find it here. She said something along the lines of it's a long-term goal. Grit, she said grit is a growth mindset. It's the ability to learn is not fixed. Meaning your capabilities, your understanding in life, what it is right now, it's not permanent. You can continue to develop knowledge. You can continue to grow amongst yourself and amongst your peers. And I think one thing that's super, super important And especially us who are in college, who are finishing college, or going into grad school or law school, it's long-term goals. It's like you mentioned, every day you're working towards those goals. And I think that's what it boils down to. Grit, it's not about talent, it's not about strength, it's not about speed. It's about being consistent. It's about being willing to pursue something, take some losses, and then keep going. Understanding like your imperfections, understanding like that you fell short, understanding that like you didn't quite have what it took, but like that saying, the only time you fail is when you give up. And I think that's what grit is. Like, you think about just like anyone, for example, like who continues to keep going, and you have to admire that at some level. It doesn't matter what it is. I always look at people, whether they're a plumber or a teacher for 20 years, the fact that they wake up and do what they do on a consistent level, that to me is more inspiring than someone who just becomes a doctor and lives a successful career. Sure, that's applaudable, and it's nice. It's like, man, it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of studying, it's a lot of devotion. But I think to me, most appealing to me, and what really tugs at my heart, is someone who just day after day does something consistently. That to me is grit. She again, she talked about having like that future, having the long-term goal and working towards it, and that's the growth mentality of grit. But to me, grit is every day you're about it. Doesn't matter what it is, you're about it. So for my question to you is, what's your interpretation of grit? Like, what is something you look at and you're like, that to me is grit?
The perfect example, I mean, just right off the top of my head, Rudy Rudiger. When you see that movie and you see that level of commitment, the grit that he had a long-term goal, right? And his long-term goal was to get into Notre Dame football and play for Notre Dame. So he had in his mindset that that's what he's going to do. So every day he would work on his homework because he knew that in order to play football, he had to get good grades to get into Notre Dame. So he would study, and on top of studying, he's working, trying to still maintain that level of physical fitness for the Notre Dame football team. He willed himself at those practices. He would show up and he would bug the coach. He would constantly be trying to find any way he could to get himself on that Notre Dame football team. And after, I think it was like a couple of years, he had failed, not being able to get in Notre Dame. After working so hard, you don't necessarily see the success or see the progression as you work every day, and that can be the hard part. But what grit is knowing that you're not getting any progression or seeing any success, but still continuing to work towards that goal, to where you can finally achieve it. And Rudy Rudiger was 5 foot nothing, 100 nothing, was able to fight and be and play for the one of the best, arguably, college football teams in the United States, and receive a degree from one of the best universities in the United States as well. So that is the perfect example. That were my first thought when I think of grit. It's just somebody who just does whatever it takes, and despite some circumstances and despite whatever everyone says, um, that just have a goal, stick to it, and commit yourself to it. Not just mentally, not just physically, mentally and physically, every day without stop. Just almost like you're fixated on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I was just thinking while you were saying that, I was trying to come up with, like, I want to make it practical to whoever decides to watch this video. And I was trying to think, like, is there a moment in my life, and maybe you can start thinking about an example in your life. Is there a moment in like my life where I had this long-term goal, I had this like this this ambition, whatever it is. And I was thinking more of like that process. Like, I think the trick to not self-defeating, because that's what it is, Eric. A lot of people self-defeat before they even enter, like before they even start the race. They're like, "Oh, I can't do it. I don't have what it takes." Whatever their excuse is. And for me, from my experience, I like to take it back to when I was working retail, going to community college, and to me, it was like, okay, I have to do 3 years at the community college level, and then I have to do another year and a half at the university level. And just that in itself, I was beating myself up as a freshman in college. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to carry out my dreams, to carry out what I wanted if I had that mentality. And so I knew what I had to do is I had to change some things. And my strategy was to take things day by day, understanding like if I gave it my all today, you know, eventually I'll get where I want to be. And so I just remember working retail, and I would go all out, Eric. I would do my hair, I would iron my clothes. We would have, it would be nothing fancy. It would just be like a Gildan t-shirt with like Nordstrom on it or whatever. But what I would do is I would invest at least 45 minutes iron to do my hair and stuff like that, make sure my shoes are clean. And I'm just like, I'm getting my mind right. I'm investing in just today, like today I'm gonna go all out for my job, because you have to accept your circumstances to kind of uh believe in your future. You know what I'm saying? And that's a golden nugget for people. They have to accept where they're at, but never lose track of where they want to be. And the purpose of me ironing my clothes and doing my hair is because I understood, yes, right now I'm working retail and going to college, but when I'm finished with college, I will be working a professional job that requires me to iron clothes, that require me to do my hair, to look good, to to come into work, come into the office or whatever, groomed, like, well. And so it's not going to be like this new routine. It's something that transpires over a period of time. That's something been putting into practice. But one thing I just wanted to emphasize, about the whole having a dream or having a goal, is like, I think it's important to accept where you're at right now. I don't care if it's the first step of a whole stairway of where you want to be. If you're at the beginning stages of where you want to be, accept where you're at right now. Accept the job that you have, accept your circumstances, and give it your all. Eventually I graduated community college. I transferred into a university. Eventually I went from the retail store into the warehouse, and life kind of made its transitions. But I think one thing that helped was just investing in the moment, but in the back of my mind, having that long term vision. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and just on the other spectrum of thinking, I had this one experience I remember when I was younger, um, but it kind of goes with the same thought pattern of what's going on here with grit. Normally, there's the people that start off from the bottom, right? People like
Hmm.
you and I that are smaller are already at the disadvantage, so we have to work with grit, right? Whereas others are already at the top. There's people like Tristan Workman that are 6'2", Gretty throwing 87, right? So they don't necessarily have that grit that we have at this age. So when they go into life, right, they're not necessarily knowing what grit is and what that work ethic is like. So and for my example, was I was doing a mud run. I don't know if you're familiar with the mud run.
Hmm.
And my goal, my head, I'm just this athlete, right? I'm like, I'm gonna kill this
Hmm.
race. I'm gonna finish first. I'm confident, right? I'm confident. Just
Yeah.
off the shoulder, right? And then I full sprint right out the gate, and I'm doing great, right? I'm in first. I'm hopping over the obstacles. I'm climbing through the mud, and then I just start getting winded. I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, this is. I did not pace myself, and at that point, I realized I needed grit.
Hmm.
That's that moment where people need to understand that no matter if you're from the lower end and you're have that grit already built mindset, or you come in there with a bunch of confidence and you've always had a lot of things go your way in life, no matter what, it's going to be grit that stands you out and gives you the durability, the strength, and the commitment, the motivation to go through the hard times, the the difficulties, the fatigue, the challenges. It's grit is what's going to get you through all of those things rather than your intelligence, your strength, or anything other than that. It's your grit that will get you through those difficult times. And that's how you can tell apart people who are successful because they had that grit to go through the difficult time when they couldn't rely on their talent, when they couldn't rely on their skill, strengths, money, anything like that. It's grit that would get you through to be or accomplish the goals that you have.
Yeah, it's a great point. And like I like when you mentioned how like you didn't pace yourself, and that's another kind of form of grit is stamina. Like like for those who are watching, and it's just important to understand that grit isn't like an IQ. It's not a talent. It's not, there's no body weight attached to it. It's stamina. It's being able to have consistency, being able to do things over and over again. You know, there's two things I wanted to point out. One, I once heard that Usain Bolt is such a like gritty athlete. He's done it for so long. He's wanted it so bad for so long. He's actually paced. I don't know what he runs, a 400 or I don't know. He doesn't go by time. He actually counts his steps. That's how like gritty he's become with his field. So I think it's something like 78 strides, and he knows on the 78th stride is when he crosses the line. That's just grit. That's stamina. That's doing something over and over again. That's becoming like a perfectionist. That's and and that's exactly what it is. At the end of it, um, you look like a perfectionist, but how many times did he, you know, before he became a pro, how many times did he fail? I'm sure he's not the first person. Uh, like, and I know for a fact he can go undefeated. You know, I'm sure a lot of people beat him in the past, but because he stayed consistent, he's known as the greatest. I'm sure there's people faster than him, but they weren't consistent. They didn't hang in there. They didn't continue to train. They didn't continue to persevere. And that's why they never got the spotlight. They let their talent get ahead of themselves. You know what I'm saying? And I could promise you Usain Bolt wasn't the best, but because he was gritty, he's now considered the best. And another thing I wanted to point out with with my dog Louie, I would take him to Petco training when he was a puppy, and they would always say take your dog for like a mile to 2 mile either walk or run before you come in. That's so all their energy's out, so they're not as enthusiastic about the training, because we want to make sure that it's all like their training, their obedience is all about connection with the trainer. It's not about enthusiasm or excitement with the other dogs. It's 100%. It's when it's stamina. It's 100%. Okay, I'm tired, but I love my owner, and I'm gonna listen to my owner. And just that thing you're saying about the mud run and how you got winded and you didn't pace yourself, that's good because it kind of shows where you're at in whatever course you're on in life, and it tells you what you need to work on, how you should pace yourself, how you should approach it differently. And for Louis, the main thing I wanted to bring that up is discipline is part of grit, you know. And I'm sure he was tired going into after walking 2 miles going into training, but because Louis has grit, he was still able to do the trainings for an hour every Sunday, you know.
Mm-hmm. Now, I just have an interesting kind of question. Now that we've kind of talked about grit for a while and explained what it is, how do you build grit if you don't have it?
Yeah, so for me personally, I think the most important thing, I mentioned Usain Bolt. I think building grit starts with making a decision on what you want to do. First off, I think that's key. You can't be wishy-washy about something. You got to grit. It could be about anything. For me in particular, it was about school. From the second I went to college, I was full sending. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. There was no I tried. There was no I couldn't do it. In my mind, 100%, whether it was going to the library, study groups, tutoring sessions, staying after class, going early to class, I did it all. And for me, it's you make a decision and then you have to full send. You have to really commit to it. You know, I know people who are starting tattoos and are tattooing. I know people who are making music, people who are designing t-shirts. That's step one. You got to decide what you want to do in full send.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've seen a couple of Netflix movies. I forget what the names of them were, but one of the things that stood out to me was a vision board. If you create
Hmm.
yourself a vision board, just go to Michael's or your Walmart, whatever it is, get a white piece of board, poster sheet, whatever it might be, cut out, print, and put on there on that board your vision, right? Your goals. For you, it was graduating. Maybe it also would be to uh, work out 3 times a day, or
Hmm.
whatever your goals might be. Put it on a vision board. And to me, I'm a visual learner. If I
Hmm.
see that every day, it's a reminder to me, okay, I need to work today to achieve those goals. This goal, that goal, and this goal. And also, it just keeps that refreshing in your head, like today's a new day, today's a new day, because you get to see that every morning, and every morning you get closer and closer to that goal without even knowing
Hmm.
that you're doing it. But the visual representation of that board can be very helpful as well in starting and building that grittiness. When you lack the motivation, when you lack the commitment, you just take a look at the board and it reminds you, this is what I'm working for. This is what I need, because sometimes it may be hard for to visualize things all the time, or to remember the commitment it takes to achieve the goals that you want. So to have that visual representation and that reminder is essential, to trying to build grittiness.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think the vision board's actually like slept on. I don't think a lot of people really buy into it, and I don't think it's not because they don't want to or they're lazy. I just don't they don't understand the power behind a vision board. And so from my personal experience, um I'd either save something like like on my lock screen. I would save a picture, whatever it is. On my desktop screen, I would save a picture. So when I see it constantly, it's a motivating factor, and I think the real importance of a vision board is like, so you let's say it's a car. So you put a car, whatever it is, a BMW, a Lexus, you put that on your whiteboard that you got from Walmart or from Walgreens. And you need to go further than that. What kind of BMW? 7 Series, a 5 Series? Okay, what color? All right, what kind of rims is it gonna have? Um, is it tinted windows? You need to get, I mean, you need to get as serious as you need to get to start until you believe it. You know, what's the car scent gonna smell like? Is it leather interior? Is it gonna have, what is it? Seat warmers. And what you're doing is you're kind of manifesting it in your heart. You're planting those seeds in your mind, and almost where like it's almost tangible, where you can almost actually feel the leather seats, you can almost actually feel the steering wheel, and that is the power of a vision board. That should be the optimal goal. For some people, they're able to post a picture and that's enough for them. That gets them fired up in the morning. For me, I need something a little bit more. I need something to kind of like, I need to get my senses going, like, okay, what would the car smell like? What would the engine sound like? What would it feel like? And so for me with a vision board, I have to be like a little, because I'm more tactile learning. So I need to kind of get my senses going, and that in itself about a vision board is very important. And I do find myself not necessarily making vision boards all the time, but I tend to write things down, like, in 3 years I will have this, and I'm just what I'm doing is I'm trying to get that physical feeling, even though it's not possible because I'm writing it down, I'm believing it. But to me, I do it so much that it's almost like it's really there. I can almost touch the car. I can almost smell the car. I can almost hear the car.
I like the one word that you had said really, really stood out to me, which is the word manifest. How you
Hmm.
build that to come to life, right? With that vision board, with the smell of the car, the smell or the sound of the engine, right? You manifest that into life because you want it, and
Hmm.
things naturally come to it, right? Like for example, when I'm interested in law, of course, and I wanted to see some courtroom. I wanted to go to trial. I wanted to see what it's like. So I Googled court times and trials that the public can see. And I called down at least like 7 different courthouses asking if I can come and witness a trial any type of way I can. I ended up finding somebody or talking to somebody, and they're like, yeah, we have a trial conference. And I'm not familiar with what that is, or at that time, I'm like, sure, whatever it is, I'm going to be there. So bright early at 7 a.m., I got up, I went down to the courthouse wearing my suit and tie, trying to look professional. I got in the courthouse, and I'm waiting. I'm listening to a couple of sentencing and hearings. I'm taking notes. I'm sitting in the back. I'm soaking up all the information as possible. And right when the time period for when the trial conference was about to end, I was kind of getting up and getting ready to leave, and I heard the judge say, "All right, next we have on our docket a trial, a murder trial." And I was like, "Oh, I gotta stay for this."
Yeah.
So I ended up staying, and I was watching the trial, and I'm watching the prosecuting attorney give their opening statements, and I'm watching these, and I'm like in awe and shock, and I'm taking notes, and I'm doing everything. And at the end of the trial, I went up to the attorneys and I was like, "Hi, my name is Eric Ogaz. I'm a student, and I'm aspiring to be an attorney. When is your next court trial date so that I can be here to observe it?" And they got the information for it, and I showed up. I went, I think it was for the next 3 weeks, the rest of that trial. I showed up every day to court and watched the trial. There's even some days where like the closing argument was on a school day, and I kind of like did my homework beforehand so that I can go to the trial and watch and observe and take notes, because I was so fascinated. That was my vision, right? I wanted to be where they are, so I got there. And at the end of the trial, I had already built this rapport with the attorneys by asking them questions, by going up to them and kind of saying like, "Okay, like this was awesome. You know, I really like this point that you made." And they were kind of asking me too, like, "What do you think that I should work on as a spectator, right?" Because they're trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. So what I see is kind of similar things to what the jury sees. So they want to see room for improvement of how they can better their case. And so at the end of the trial, I had asked them for any job opportunities that they have, because next year I was wanting to work. And sure enough, they were like, "Yeah, of course, I can get you in contact with our advisor." I got in contact, and that's how I'm actually working right now for my internship at the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. It's like you said, you just manifest it. It doesn't. It's not like
Hmm.
I went there knowing to watch a trial. I didn't know they're trying to get the internship, but it just happened because every
Hmm.
day I went down to that courthouse. Every day I took notes. I paid attention. Every day I asked questions. I was involved in the case. I wasn't just there. I wasn't just half, getting
Hmm.
just not putting in the full effort. Every day I put in the full effort, and it manifested to where I have an internship for one of the largest counties in Arizona, attorney's office. So it's it's just being able to put yourself in the
Hmm.
situations to succeed, and that is grittiness as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. Like two things. So, positioning is the first one, and I'll talk about that first. So, early in my college years, I was so excited to meet new friends on campus. Like, was I planning on hanging out with them after class? No, not even close. But just to see them and understanding for 18 weeks they're going to be my classmates, that was good enough for me. So I would get their name, what are they about, how old they are, and I was always the baby. Typically, there was always like young adults, mid 20s, early 20s. I was still 18, 19, and they would tell me off the bat, and I never thought of anything of it early on, whether they were like a single mom, single dad, divorced or getting divorced, or they work two jobs. And at first I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool, blah blah." I was barely working fast food, like my first job. And as time went on, I would hear the same stories and I wouldn't see the people anymore on campus. And the reason why I wouldn't see them anymore on campus is because of, like you mentioned earlier, is positioning. They didn't position themselves according to their goal. You don't enroll into college to drop out. You enroll into college to graduate. But if you don't position yourself to graduate, to succeed in classes, you're gonna find yourself failing, and failing often. And so by my third, even fourth year of college, I would hear like like a female who's a single mother who's working full time, and in my heart, I'm like, man, I hope she really has something that's going to work out so she's in position to graduate, that she's able to concentrate on her goal. Um, because I've seen this happen before. And sure enough, I wouldn't see that person come to class anymore. I've seen it time and time again. But I think the important thing, like you mentioned earlier, is you had a goal, you had intentions, and you positioned yourself. And I think it's like one of those things, like where stars align, stars align for that particular season in your life. And I think in order for stars to align, it's about putting yourself in that position and making sure that there's no distractions. You mentioned that there was even school days, on court days, but you made it happen. Like, you positioned yourself in that court system. You did have school, but you made it work. You know what I'm saying? So for those single mothers, for the single dads, for people who are married or working two jobs, you're not uh you're not in position to fail. I'm not saying that. It's just you're making it more difficult on yourself. And it's not impossible. Like you said, you had court day uh and school days. It's not impossible. You made it happen. And I just want to emphasize, to make it easier on yourself, it's you have to position yourself. It's time management, it's organizing your schedule. Um those are the key contributing factors. And again, to stay on the theme of grit, that's what grit is. You become an expert at organizing time. You become an expert at knowing, ooh, I can't go to that party. I can't enroll into that class at this time because I have this commitment. You know, grit again is stamina. Grit is failing and making adjustments. And most importantly, grit is positioning, understanding what you want and making it happen 100%.
Absolutely, I agree with that, and it's good to always have a support group to be
Hmm.
there. Or even if you don't have a support group, faith is extremely strong foundation for people to have that emotional sense to get you through the difficult times. For me, it's prayer. I pray, and it gets me through a lot of difficult times, or sometimes where I just don't feel motivated today, or I just don't feel like getting up and putting in the work. To me, it's prayer. I'll get up and I'll pray, or there's a struggle or a problem I'm facing, and I just don't know how to get around it. I'll pray about it, and if you pray about it and believe it, or you have a support group and they believe in you, or even just believing in yourself, it helps to get through those difficult times, because that's one thing through this endurance of grit, is that no matter what, there's different levels of grit for everybody, right? Aaron's grit or Felix's grit is going to be different than my grit, right? Uh, so getting through my level of grit is going to be different than how he gets through his level of grit. And that foundation, that support group, is what's going to help you overcome those obstacles and help you feel emotionally energized, because being energized is all about grit, having the energy to get through the difficult times. So yeah, support groups and faith.
Yeah, definitely. I agree 100%. And I know some people tend to be antisocial, not intentional, but just sometimes they don't prefer to have a group or a crowd. They more like to do things independently. Sometimes they feel as though they flourish better independently. They can concentrate more. They like the quiet environment. They kind of like the isolation. And like you mentioned, prayer, I think more tangible things, more practical things for people. If prayer doesn't work for them, choice of music, that impacts your motivation. Um, things you watch, YouTube, movies. Um, I know some people are like kind of sketchy about meditating or prayer. I like to keep it simple, you guys. For me personally, I'm in the car, and for a couple minutes, I just turn off the radio and I just start talking to myself. I start talking to God, and just kind of going about, like, I try to visualize what my day's gonna be like. And that's, again, to stay on top of the theme of grit. You guys, there's multiple factors that contribute to grit. Grit is, I think, like I said, grit's that end result. It's that Usain Bolt, um, the image of grit. But the work required to achieve that image of grit is the failure, is the practical, the prayers in your car. It's the vision boards. It's the support groups. It's the music and the things that you watch. It's the level of concentration. It's the level of commitment. It's positioning. These are all things. These are all tools that Eric and I have shown you from experience, things that work for us. And when he sent me this link, I was like, man, I haven't heard this word grit since junior year of high school. Almost 5 years ago. And growth mindset. I haven't heard that since freshman year of college. 4 years ago. So, or 3.5 years ago. So to me, like, it was kind of refreshing to hear this, because I don't want to like sound like egotistic, but for me, it's like, man, I remember first hearing this concept and kind of like what? Like, no, it's not really a thing. And again, I told you guys at the start of this podcast, I told you guys that I actually grew up in high school believing that if your parents were smart, you're smart. And so when I heard this concept in freshman year of college, I was like, this is kind of doesn't really go with my perspective about education, about IQ. Like, I always thought IQ was a gift. IQ was DNA. Um, so yeah, these are all practical things, guys, that we have done in our personal experience that we wanted to share with you guys. I definitely am in love with this theme. Grit and vision go hand in hand, coincide. Um, is there any last words that you wanted to say, Eric?
No, just to again make a visual board, make a goal, whatever that might be. Even if it's something small, it doesn't have to always be big. It could be just simply making a cup of coffee every morning or taking your daily vitamins. Start off progressively. Make a vision board of small things, and you can work toward the big things. Because if you can do the small things um, every day, and you can work towards the little goals and achieve those little goals, then you'll get a greater understanding of how to achieve the bigger goals. And it's just through experience, it's through commitment, it's through making the decision that you want to achieve those. It's really a decision. It's not a talent. It's a decision that you make of wanting to achieve that goal or not. Once you make that decision, it needs to be full commitment, 100%, because you can't go 75% on some days, 100% on others. You need to go 100% all the time, but also make sure that you have that support group or that time where you reevaluate or kind of de-stress, because if you go 100% all the time, you're going to be burnt out. So make sure you also have um, that backup to where you can kind of relieve some stress or get through some of that aggravation that comes with it, because there's going to be plenty of aggravating times where you're just frustrated, you're working and you're not seeing results. It's good to, for me, it was prayer. For Aaron, it was music and that self-talking. Make sure you have find your support group or support foundation to get you through those hard times when you're just frustrated. But just make a decision, set a goal, whether it's small or big, um, and start from there.
Perfect, sweet. So that's gonna do you guys for this podcast episode 1. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back next week.